Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. Not that much news in EVE Online, but there is something that I thought was very cool. CCP Carker on the Pulse announced that there were some small improvements that were brought to the market, and I think we should start by showing that off actually. So there is now the partial search function. For instance, if I want to go towards Gecko, I press GE and it starts to open up everything with GE, and then as I press the C, there it is, the Gecko shows up. Very cool, but what's also very handy is if I then go back, it starts to redelete everything and it puts me back with the closed groups here. So very nice little feature. On top of that, if you guys look for stuff in the market quite often, you can find yourself with a market that looks something like this, and then you have to browse quite a little bit. There's now one click button, close all groups. Very, very handy. So really awesome to see that the small improvements are still coming, and yeah, this should help people that use the market a lot. Quite a bit. Next up, let's take a quick look at the New Eden store. I also saw that there should be some sales from the EVE Pulse, and it is actually quite a few of them. So the Blackfire skins are on sale, Triglavian stuff, pretty cool. Then we get True Deliverance for the Sanshia ships. That's, well, okay, a little bit light for my taste, but it's definitely different. And then In Rust We Trust is also on sale. We've got a sale for some of these avatar skins. Ooh, that's 2 skins for the price of 1. Very nice. Love the black one here, of course. And then the red one in the back here is really nice as well. In Rust We Trust again. And that is it for this week. But this is actually an uncommonly large amount of sales on the New Eden store. So if you're looking for some of these skins, perhaps you fly Sanshia ships, perhaps you actually have an avatar that now, of course, has been redesigned and you want to give that a fresh skin, there are some options for you there. And the Helmet's Harrier's skin is still available as well. That one looks really nice in my opinion. Like the Gila, for instance, could use a skin for the Gila. And the Rattlesnake, I've actually been using the Rattlesnake a little bit for conduit testing after the nerfs. It's been going pretty well, but I still don't have a skin for that one, so perhaps I'll buy one of these at some point. But let's move on to the market itself. That's why everyone is here, of course, and we're going to start with plex and stuff coming in at 255. Like that. So let's open this up, and you may already have noticed it on the ticker, of course. If we look at the chart for plex, we are down to a 1-year low. We are straight through the 3 million mark, which we were hesitating for quite a little bit. But we also noticed a volume spike, so there has to be something sales related going on here as well. And if I'm not mistaken, there's also a sale on Omega Time or something like that happening. So this is CCP intervention on the one hand. On the other hand, we have to be honest, it's like almost a year through that we have downward prices in plex, more pressure on plex, and I was hoping for the bottom to be like a FanFest region. That of course has been cancelled due to the real life situation, and so we have a real down market in plex at the moment. On top of that, we of course know that CCP is planning to do a lot about resource generation, and that includes potentially ISK. Which could be part of the reason why, well, people are not able or willing to spend as much ISK on plex anymore, and so demand goes down and the prices are going down as well. In JITA, 2.9 million for the sellers. That is, yeah, it's been quite a long time since we've seen the sellers go below 3 million, but here we are. Cheap plex are available right now, relatively speaking, of course. If we look at this 1-year chart, 2.7 million for the buyers, and then do we go up or down? Yep, 2.85 million for the sellers of plex in the Tranquility Trade Tower, and then we stay just above 2.7 million for the buyers. So a big surprise to me. Of course, I do personally still believe that if FanFest would have been just something that that happened in April, early April. We would have been in a very different situation now, with a lot more hype, a lot more information as well. But I think CCP is happy with, well, not happy with having to cancel FanFest, but basically with the fact that they can now stay on that. We'll release information when we're really ready to do so, and we want to keep surprising the players. And I'm really looking forward to whatever it is that they plan to do in May. But the major hype building with a full FanFest and the trailer and all the dev blogs, all the talks about their plans, potential future plans. There's always at least some talks about like long distance stuff, what they're hoping to do in the future with the graphics engine, things like that. It's always really a big week of hype for EVE Online. That tends to be the turnaround on the Plex market, and now we don't really have that. So you have Plex below 3 million, which is pretty damn cool, of course, for people that want to Plex their accounts. We haven't seen that in a long time. The multiple pilot train certificates are also going down, a little bit of a volume bump as well, so might also be tied to the sales, but we are now substantially below 1.5 billion for the multiple pilot train certificate, just below that for the first seller, and less than 1.4 billion for the buyers. Again, showing, in my opinion, that it is the demand that's drying up a little bit. People are being a bit more careful with their ISK at the moment. After that, we've got the skill extractors. Same thing, of course, another leg down to 330 million ISK, 322 for the sellers and 315 for the buyers of skill extractors. And then, of course, this should have an impact on the skill injectors. Let's take a look at that chart. Here is the large skill injector. Not really another leg down like what we see with the Plex, but we very clearly are now playing with those 1-year low points. We're landing on the 780 million mark with the 5-day moving average, which is the lowest it's been for this year as well. Look at where we started the year, 1 billion ISK down to 780. That is a decent pullback as well. It's 778 for the sellers and 740 million for the buyers. Again, showing it's really the demand side that's opening up a pretty big gap here. I think it was happening with Plex as well. And basically a sale is what has forced sellers to close that gap. And at the moment, there's not really a sign that we are going up anytime soon, except in my opinion, of course, the fact that this has been a 1-year downward trend, so it does look very interesting to try and perhaps get in on this level. But I would say something that I say almost every EVE talk: don't go crazy with the volumes. Make sure that it's manageable. Buying at this point, I think, is the right move. Putting all your ISK in Plex right now is probably not the right move, but slowly building things up, I think, does make a lot of sense. You can also clearly see on this 1-year chart the potential upswing. After that, we've got the small skill injector going for a more pronounced 1-year low point, but also the 5-day moving average moving up just a little bit. So we went below 160 million ISK. We're at 158 for the sellers and 148 for the buyers. A bit less margin. I think here we see a little bit more of a sharper decline as well, which I think is still that same story. Demand is petering out, and yeah, sellers are having to compete a lot more in order to get their sales going. What else do we have left? The daily alpha injectors, of course, that are flatter, but also going through the 40 million mark on the 5-day moving average. Not at a 1-year low point just yet. We are talking 38 to 39 million for the sellers and 36 million for the buyer. Much less of a difference in margin. I think this is still different. A comment said that you could turn Plex into daily alpha injectors. I thought that that was not the case, that you had to buy them from the store and that there was no direct conversion, which there is, for instance, for the skill extractors, as far as I know. Daily alpha injectors are actually straight from CCP, and that is it. Let me know in the comments if I'm wrong on that, but that to me would explain why all the others are basically at 1-year low points, together with Plex, and the daily alpha injector is very low on the year as well, but is not yet playing with that 30 million mark and not showing that same kind of pressure. And finally, we've got the hypercores that are continuing to decline as well. 300,000 ISK for the sellers, 261,000 for the buyers. Is this a sign of something else happening? Perhaps a real money conversion thing that is forcing prices down? Or are we talking that the Hypernet, well, is still trying to find its place in New Eden and still going down after the hype launch, of course. On launch day was crazy, but right now I think people that use the Hypernet have found it and they try to sell very specific items and things like that. But the usage of it will probably have gone down substantially. Let's move on to the minerals. Next, coming in at 10.10. Here we should also see some pretty interesting stuff. You may already have seen from titanium that we are still going down, but the movement has slowed down substantially. We are at, and here I really should, okay, New Caldari, that's only one jump out, but to be honest, 920 for the first seller, 930 for most sellers, and the buyers coming in at 877. You're still very easily getting 9 ISK for titanium, which is not the 1-year high point. We went up to 10 ISK and even above that on the announcement and the nerf to mining in 0.0, but the shortage phase is definitely still here. 9 ISK for titanium is a very, very good price and a good time for high-sec miners, in my opinion. After that, we've got the pyrite chart that is staying at this 7.5 ISK range pretty easily. So also not showing any signs that there's extra stocks that have suddenly been brought to the market or anything like that. It's 786 for the sellers, 7 ISK for the buyers. Decently wide margin between buyers and sellers here. We have a little bit of dumping here with a couple billion coming down at the 793 mark. So there's some competition below that, but you can tell that supply is not that plentiful because we are able to maintain this current price range, which is actually a high point for the year as well. After that, we've got the Mexilon chart. Same thing here, right? If I'm not mistaken, Pyrite and Mexilon still available through moons. So those are not shooting up substantially in price, but 70 ISK on the chart, still definitely the high end of its trade range. 72 almost for the sellers and 64 for the buyers. That is, of course, God damn it, sorry about that. That is, of course, a really good price considering the fact that it's still gonna be very available compared to, for instance, titanium. After that, we've got Isogen. This one has to give back a little bit of ground, went to 20 ISK and was able to defend that for almost 2 months. Pretty impressive stuff, but at the tail end to no avail. 2017 still for the sellers, but 1820 for the buyers. That margin is opening up again. Might be a similar story to plex, right, where what am I gonna do with my ISK? Definitely not buy Isogen. I think it's also a little bit different from the others because Isogen has been by and large the most oversupplied mineral in the game after all the changes. It basically is so that there's not enough usage of Isogen in the game with current trends in industry, that it's just too easy to oversupply it, and as a result it's got this decline in price here on not that crazy supply input, right? I mean, nothing that new. 250 million here, 580 million here. Sure, that's a decent amount, but it doesn't feel that crazy, and yet the price is driven down very quickly because of that Isogen supply here. After that, we've got the Noxium market. That's also continuing a decline. Is getting back to 300 ISK, which is its normal trade range, you could say, after all of the mineral changes from a couple of years ago. Before that, Noxium was far more valuable than this. It's 310 ISK for the sellers, 307 for the buyers. So we are, I think, starting to form a bottom, but also something that apparently is still plentiful in the market. That spike has been completely negated, and we're back at the normal 300 ISK trade range. For our former nullsec minerals, here is the Zydrine chart. That one is continuing to decline, goes up to 650. I'm guessing that supplies from moon mining are down substantially because of the changes there, and that's going to be the trigger for this increase in price. 670 ISK almost for the sellers. That's not bad. 653 for the buyers. They are basically forced up as well. Very pronounced 1-year high point, and I think here Basically, CCP did recognize that it was becoming a little bit of a problem for Zydrine and Megasite to stay somewhat relevant. The supply chain in HiSec was just too plentiful, and that this was really causing problems with the value of these minerals that still have, to me at least, right, Zydrine, Megasite should be a somewhat more appealing proposition, something of value that is still mineable, but also, right, you can get that from reprocessing. It should be a bit more rare than it was becoming. And here we actually see Megasite also breaking out from its slump down to 350 and below that, and we're back above 500 disc on the chart, which is of course pretty damn good news. I think 550 for the sellers, 472 for the buyers. Buyers still lagging behind a little bit, but if this trend continues and Zydrine shows the way, then I do think that Megasite will start to go up from here as well. Very impressive, of course, to see that Zydrine come back from 500 to 650 over the 1 year. Low bottom was actually 450, so this is not bad value for Zydrine going up. I think it's actually pretty good news. And then finally we've got our Morphite chart that is staying at 17,500 disc. Very expensive, of course. Part of that is going to be because it's needed in the production of all of those new implants as well, as I found out. But 19,720 for the sellers, very expensive. 17,000 for the buyers. Another 1 year high point, and look at where the year started, 7,500 disc to 19k. That's more than double the price. Definitely the biggest winner on the 1 year chart here for the minerals. It is different though, keep that in mind, from all the others. This one is tied to Tech 2 production, implant production, stuff like that. So it has its different uses that make it a little bit unique in this list. Next up, we get our PI market coming in at 1630. Let's take a look at that. Any signs of finally a comeback for demand? Well, here we get a little bit of a bounce from broadcast nodes, but keep in mind we went to 1.9 million and below on a couple of days. That is, of course, basically well below the average, and a real opportunity to grab some cheap broadcast nodes. That usually does have an impact. Volumes were up a little bit on those days as well, just before and just below that low point. So we get a little bit of a boost back, but it's just above 2 million for the sellers and at 1.9 million for the buyers. I wouldn't say that this is completely crazy. This is back to the average 2 million range. Construction blocks still struggling, so at this point I'm not seeing that much difference in the story. 9,350 for the sellers and 8,000 disc for the buyers. Still clearly lacking in demand, and we are trading well below average for the 1 year chart. Consumer electronics, try to get back a little bit, but after reaching that 1 year low point of 7,500 disc, we went back up to almost 10,000 disc. But even that does not last very long. 10,000 for the sellers, but 9,000 for the buyers. These are going back down already. Again, showing that typical lack of demand, which we've been struggling basically since fall in a lot of the PI market. Not all of it. Coolants tied to fuels, to my surprise, still doing really well, because from the ticker you may already have seen that nitrogen fuel blocks continuing to decline below 18,000 disc. Very cheap at the moment. Must be tied to ice mining then, because coolants are still in a very good spot. 13,000 for most sellers, 10,600 for buyers. Sure, it's a little bit of a margin, but this 1 year chart is not that bad. Shows that the value has been maintained quite well for coolants, for instance. Crop protectant solutions slowly edging back below the 200,000 disc mark. 195 for the sellers, 166 for the buyers. This is actually, I think, a pretty normal pattern. Implants are still being brought to the game. You get implants also from like the Hunt, if I'm not mistaken. All of that requires that cryoprotectant solution production, but we are slowly going back down here as well. The market, of course, finds its supply eventually. People see that opportunity, more comes to the market, and the balance will eventually be found, and it's going to be at a lower price than the current one, of course. For enriched uranium, also, if we look at this 1 year chart, 13 to 14k, we've been able to maintain that for almost the entire year. Right at the tail end, we've got a dip to 12,000, but we're already back up there. 13,400 for the sellers, 12,200 for the buyers. Bit of a margin, sure, but this is tied to fuels, and I think it shows that much more stable demand because of that, because of its consumption. Integrity response drones continuing to stay below average, 2.25 million for the sellers, 2.1 million, a little bit above that for the buyers. Definitely pretty low on the 1-year chart. Advanced PI materials, my read on that was that demand was definitely slowing down as well. We've got a little bit of speculation that happened on potentially an announcement for structures with FanFest. That didn't materialize, and I think this latest slump, someone in the comments also confirmed that that seemed to be right, is that speculators basically lose their patience, dump their advanced PI materials on the market. Demand stays the same, but this also does force prices to go to these low points. If you're still looking for cheap advanced PI materials, you definitely can find them at the moment. Mechanical parts, not that good for the year, but staying above 10k, so I'd say that that's pretty happy, because this is very easy to produce on barren planets. 10,700 for the sellers, 9,350 for the buyers, and an average price above 10,000 disk is not that bad. Organic mortar applicators, again, you get that little bubble here on speculation in March. Then you get the dumping that's happening, 950,000 at the low end, and we are right there for the buyers, 1 million for the sellers. So again, pretty damn low for this advanced PI material. Robotics is finally showing a first sign of recovery. Robotics in the, let's say, last half year, and then before that was really stable around 100,000 disks, spending most of its time just above that or just below that. But now here, after the fall, we again do see this this one drop off to, well, very low points, 80,000 disks on a couple of days. That is really cheap. We're finally turning that around a little bit on the seller side of things. They are holding off a little bit, 89,000 for the sellers, but look at those buyers, 77,000 disks for robotics. This is the first sign of a potential turnaround. You can still buy below 80,000 disk, that's down here. I would say that if you're looking for a PI investment, some robotics below 80k do make sense in my personal opinion. Self-harmonizing power cores, same story. In fact, here I think that the speculation started a little bit earlier, January, February, March, couple of spikes that don't really have a clear explanation, but then patience ran out in those investors. FanFest didn't give us any new structures or any big news in that direction just yet, and then here's the dumping, and of course the prices dropping down to a low point and now not able to recover, because I don't think they're willing to take the gamble again at this point. 1.9 million to just below 2 million for most sellers, less than 1.9 million for the buyers. That is really cheap. If you want to still take the gamble, I would say that this is the time to do so. Take advantage of the greed that people showed up here in February, March, hoping to cash out with FanFest, and now of course you can take advantage of their lack of patience. Superconductors next, continuing to build on a very strong start of the year here, basically going from 10,000 disk up to 15,000 disk. Sellers are at 16,650. That is still very expensive. 60% increase, not bad at all. 12,380 for the buyers. Awesome for me personally, because I produce this, but yeah, one of the exceptions, and that is going to be tied, I think, to all of the implant stuff that basically has boosted a couple of very specific PI materials, such as the test cultures as well, staying above 15,000 disk. In fact, it's 20,000 for the sellers, 13,860 for the buyers. That's a crazy high spread, of course. I don't think you're going to be able to trade that much, although average prices are somewhat in between. So there is, I would say, a chance that you can buy these for like 14,000 disk and try to sell them for like 19,000 disk right now in this crazy test culture market, because that's a very wide margin here. But the price increase is very noticeable, very impressive as well, starting just in late February. So this have been a nice couple of months for test cultures. And finally, the wetware mainframes with the same January, February, March spike on a little bit of speculation in my opinion, but managing to keep the damages contained and actually staying around the average price. 2.27 million for the sellers, 2 million for the buyers. So that's not bad, but we definitely, in my opinion, don't see a sign of a general increase in demand here. We've got certain niches that are a bit more stable, like fuel related stuff, and then of course with the implant stuff you've got some of them as well that are actually higher up in price at the moment. Pretty cool stuff, showing that, well, while it's one big segment, PI, it does have different components to it that allow for opportunity here and there, and we're not seeing a general trend, which does happen from time to time. Sometimes you see, all right, all of them are going up, all of them are going down. Right now that is not the case. We get a bit of a mixed picture for PI. Allow me to drink for just a moment here. There we go, and yeah, then let's move on to our advanced wood materials at 2510. Here, would the nerfs have an impact on nullsec, potential moon mining, more conflict? Maybe, but I haven't really seen any sign of that materializing just yet. Let's take a look at it. Crystalline carbonite continuing to climb, going towards a one-year high point. In fact, almost 170 for the sellers, not a lot of supply. And then the buyers coming in at 160 are being forced up slowly. This is pretty impressive, and it's clearly a lack of supply considering the demand side and then the supply side. So a bit of an opposite from the PI market here, at least for crystalline carbonite. Let's see if this is going to start to materialize across the board. One thing that could happen is that people see, moon mining is just not economical anymore without all of the other minerals in the mix, and so they're stopping that. Ferrite carbide seems to be confirming that. A spike to a one-year high point, very pronounced, 163 for the sellers, 142 for the buyers. But this is basically, we went a couple of days ago to the highest point for the year by quite a mile. We're recovering from that. People did plug that gap with fresh supply. But apparently we went up to 200 ISK, so very impressive. Not really seeing the lack of supply here just yet, but of course keep in mind almost this entire page is new supply competing with that incredible opportunity that showed up all of a sudden. So let's take a look at titanium carbide. That one does not confirm the story just yet. We are back above 175, so that does bring him in line with the others. But this seems pretty damn stable. 181 for the seller. Well, that's actually up a little bit from the chart as well. And then 170 for the buyer. Supply wise, I'm not too worried here. Look at that last 24 hours. Not that bad. So maybe we need a little bit more time. But there are some signs that supplies are not being that plentiful anymore. Tungsten carbide next, 193, so that's already the best price. New supplies, not that much on this page here, and then the amount is at 177. Let's see if this translates in the metamaterials. Yep, photonic metamaterials up as well, above 20k now. Almost 19,500 for the sellers, 18,500 for the buyers. Again, we do see a bit of a rush here from 21,700 down to 19,700 on almost a page of new supply. So people notice these spikes and then they're deciding to dump their reserves. But this is very interesting. Plasmonic metamaterials going down against the trend that we're seeing so far, but there is something to notice. Of course, we're coming from 25,000 and even a couple of days of 27,500, far outstripping for instance the photonic metamaterials. So this may not be that bad. 21,360 for the sellers, 18,700 for the buyers, and we do still notice a decent amount of supply despite these declining prices. So not confirmed across the board just yet, but let's take a look at the next one. Non-linear metamaterials, bit of pressure on that one as well, and not even from that high a point on its chart. 22,430 for the sellers, 1,900 for the buyers. But here, very noticeable, we do see a lot less fresh supply coming to the market here. That is interesting. After that, we get terahertz metamaterials. Same pattern here actually. Trying to stay above 20k, not really succeeding, and here we do see plenty of supply. So it's still a mixed bag. I'm not seeing a full supply dry up just yet, but what I would say is noticeable, I think it was especially here is that we do see a supply response that is massive and immediate on a price spike. So this to me indicates that it's not really supply, but that is more reserves that are being brought to the market because they can finally sell at a better price, and a lot of them are showing signs that supplies are going down. Let's take a look at the other materials here. Fermionic condensate trying to stay above 90k, 93,000 for the sellers, 80,000 for the buyers. That's still a pretty wide margin, but look at the last 24 hours, just a couple of sell orders, not even that big in volume. So yeah, I wouldn't say that we're swimming in the advanced materials right now. Excuse me for that. Next up, ferrogel. Yeah, definitely struggling on the 1 year chart, going back down a little bit. 40,000 for the sellers, 39,000 for the buyers, and here we do still see half a page, so trend is not confirmed just yet. Let's take a look at full horizon next, continuing its slow upwards trend, pulling away from 1,000 disc. 1,100 for the sellers, almost 1,100 for the buyers, definitely being forced up, and here just 4 new sell orders in the last 24 hours. That's gonna continue, I think, for now. Hypersynaptic fibers making their way back to 12,000 and above from a 1 year high point in less than a month. Not that bad, 12,600 for the sellers, 11,000 for the buyers, and look at that. Last 24 hours, we notice nothing. Supply compared to the buy orders is definitely drying up. Is it in the perimeter trade tower or something like that? I would say no. We're not really seeing like massive supplies or a massive list above JITA with lower prices. So interesting. Hypersynaptic fibers did go to 1 year low point. We have to add that here. But here we clearly see a supply dry up, potentially due to the price range that we were at, but it could be a bit more general as well. Nano transistors actually went up to 8,000 disc, is now able to ask 6,600 for the sellers, 6,200 for the buyers. Definitely also a bit of a price margin compared to this full 1 year chart. And what I notice here again is full supply in the last 24 hours. In fact, more than that, all of this in the last 24 hours. And then we're going down from 6,700, well, not even that much. Again, feels more like a reserve response than a supply response. It's a bit too sharp. Next up here we've got the phenolic composite staying around 2k, around its average price. Supply wise, this is still quite a lot actually. That's coming in the last 24 hours. So this one is not confirming the trend. For ceramic fibers, we get a slow uptrend also from a low point of 350, going back to 400 for the sellers, 397 for the buyers. Look at that, they have forced up very quickly. And here we do see half a page of new supply. Volumes not that big anymore. So it's difficult to say if this is really what is happening, but I could see a bit of a drying up of some of the moon mining activities because of the nerf that they took, and that this will slowly have an impact on all of these advanced moon materials, increasing their price ranges potentially. At least on some of them we're seeing that happen. On the other hand, yeah, the times of plentiful are just finishing now. We are getting into that drought period right now, which means that there are still massive reserves out there. Even I, who don't really speculate that often, have some advanced moon materials sitting around waiting for better times, so I won't be the only one, of course. Next up, the Tech 2 ship market. Let's see what the impact is here. 32.55. Let's see if we've got some speculation to do. I'd rather speculate in Tech 2 ships and Tech 3 ships at the moment because well, they show a little bit more volatility than the advanced materials. Here is the Aries going up a little bit at the tail end after a very stable period, just below 30 million on the average price range. 32 million for the sellers, 27 million for the buyers, showing a bit of increased demand right now. Yeah, let's hope that we see like an oversupply push and we go back down or something like that. But this is, you could still sell, but definitely not in a buy range. Basilisk also going up in price. I'm going to take a quick look. Yeah, I bought one for 175 and we can now sell for 224 million. We're starting to see some nice profits. 192 million here for the buyers as well. We're not as high as we could go. 250 or something like that is definitely possible, but there is a slight sell opportunity in the Basilisk, especially considering that about a month ago when I made my move as well, you could have bought these for 175 million, 180, something like that was definitely possible in this region. So I could sell right now. Maybe I'll do it. We'll see. I can be patient as well and wait for a better opportunity, but there is definitely a slight opportunity in the Basilisk. Perhaps the nerf has more impact than the low sec stuff on trying to get some Take 2 ships, because their innate higher resistances of course increased in value quite a bit. The Cerberus, which I bought for 195 if I'm not mistaken, yep, is currently selling for 260 million ISK, 215 for the buyers. That one is up in price as well. Not a breakout like 280, which is of course what we would love to see. In fact, my two previous trades were on such breakouts, but a respectable sell price of 260 is already in this range here. So that is not a bad trade either if I decide to make it. Right now, unfortunately, yeah, it's not the time to buy any of these. For the Crow, yeah, difficult chart with that one data point, but I would say I'm seeing some pressure and we're finally getting back to a less than 30 million range on the average price. 31 million for the sellers, 27.5 for the buyers. And then the bad news is that we don't see several hundred more Crows coming to the market that are going to allow us to bring this down even lower. So here, a little bit too early to be buying and unfortunately too late to sell as well. The Guardian staying above 200 million as well, slight uptrend at the tail end, 222 for the sellers, 194 for the buyers. If you still want to speculate on something right now, try to buy a Guardian below 200 million. I think that would make sense. Then we've got the Hawk, at the tail end here. All of a sudden we do see quite a bit of speculation. So that's its second jump up to 50 million. Is recovering from that. 43 million for the sellers, 38 million for the buyers. And a trend that I'm seeing here, look at the volumes on this as well, is that the Hawk is a very popular platform for these events when we're going small ship types like the Hunt here, and that has definitely had an impact on the market. So it's going to be very interesting, I think, to keep this one on the list. At first I was hesitating because this first part of the chart felt like, well, this is a PvE ship, you know, Ishtar like, we're not going to see that many price spikes. But if CCP keeps up with the frigate and the destroyer type of content and of events, then we could see quite a bit of speculative opportunity in the Hawk here. I had not thought about that myself, but this trend is very obvious if you look at the prices and the volumes here. For the Heretic, ooh, another low point. That is unexpected. You guys probably know that I bought one for 52 million. We're now at 64 million for the sellers, 53.3 million for the buyers. I would still say that there is pretty much an oversupply situation right now. It's driving the price back down. If you want that cheap Heretic, you can try to buy one right now. Let's say below 55 million, which is not that bad, of course, if you look at this 1 year chart. Selling may take a while, but as I've said, for me, these interdictor investments, I'm trying to buy them really as cheap as possible, are gambles on CCP changing things up and making these super popular all of a sudden. That's what I'll be waiting for. For the Ishtar, we're continuing our seesaw movement between 230 and 250. We're at the high range again this week, 244 for the sellers, 223, 224 for the buyers. Not really tradable spikes, but showing that the Ishtar, I think, is in a good spot. Popularity-wise, it's just a great PvE platform, PvP platform, and an all-around ship that also hasn't, I think, suffered too much, especially for its exploration role from the resistance nerf, because it already has these decent innate resistances, and then all of its versatility with sentry drones, which is what I love to use with the Ishtar, allows it to stay out of trouble quite a little bit, and usually just a faction rapper is what's going to keep this thing running, while everything else goes to utility and damage. I really love it, of course, and it looks like it's not crazy popular or anything like that, but just doing really well. Next up, we've got the Manticore, just recovering from a spike up to 40 million ISK. You can see the downward trend here. Let's take a look at the prices. 33 million for the sellers, 29 million for the buyers. And then the bad news is, look at the last 24 hours. Just one seller is still 45. It's respectable. But I would, of course, have loved to see the pattern where all of a sudden a couple hundred Manticores come to the market that really crush this. Because of the opportunity, they sometimes sellers sometimes do overreact to this. And then we get that new opportunity at 25 or below. That is not materializing just yet. For the Munin, staying at 230, low end of the range. First seller coming in at 220, 200 for the buyers. But yeah, it's another heavy assault cruiser. Look at the volumes. Very difficult to be trading unless it becomes very noticeable, which to me would be below 200 million ISK. Nemesis, 30 million and above, also going back down from a spike up to 32.5 million. So my sell opportunity, do I still have some? Nope. Okay, did I sell it then? Yeah, okay, that's what I did. Again, a little bit too early, but I bought for 1875 and then I sold for 25.5 million. So this one should move to my trades made. And why doesn't he want to? Or am I copying that stuff? I'm not sure. I'll figure it out later. It's alright. So the Nemesis actually coming from a high point. So here the volumes will be important again. We are at 29 million for the sellers, 23 million for the buyers. Okay, let's try and get 23 million is showing up. That's already down here. And then we still have... not that many, but the 96 here is good news, potentially. But it's not as much as what we're used to, where it crashes the price back down towards that 20 million range. So yeah, maybe the market is becoming a little bit more careful with all of the nerfs out there. The Oneros is staying above 200 million, or trying to, 210 for the sellers. Just a complete lack of demand, 180. You could try grab an Oneros as close to 180 as possible. If you try and get that on the chart, definitely the low end of the range. At some point you'll make a profit on that, but look at these volumes, even worse than the Munin numbers, and as a result, very risky. I would never do more than one Oneros. Try and buy it at the right time. Slowly try to sell it on an above average price, but I would never be really actively trading this ship. Purifier next went to 35 million, is slowly coming down from there. 33 million for the sellers, 29 million for the buyers. So the buyers are already opening up a decent gap. And here again, last 24 hours, 4 sell orders. It's like 50 ships. We've seen far more overreaction to higher end spikes than this, or above average spikes. Then we get the Saber that is currently maybe doing what I've been looking for in all of these before here. We went up to 75 million ISK and now we're going down quite substantially. Look at these data points, 64 million on the average price, 62 million is the low end, 65 million now for the sellers. Last 24 hours, we still have some coming in here, and we're at 58.3 million for the buyers. I would say if you're looking for a cheap Saber, try and buy it below 60 million. Right now, there is potentially again a chance for you to grab that, because this is a pretty sharp decline. We're pushing straight through that 65 million mark without too much resistance. There may just be, just like how I grabbed a Heretic at 52 million, if I go for that chart, on this downtrend right here. There may just be someone impatient enough now that you will actually be able to grab that Saber for less than 60 million. So you could try to replicate what I did with the Heretic right now on the Saber. But it is pretty obvious that on a lot of these Take 2 ships, that oversupply bubble that crashes the price to those real opportunities, yeah, the market is holding off from that. The Scimitar is staying well above 200 as well, 215 to 218 for the sellers, 195 for the buyers. Yeah, that's that in between spot, right? 180-ish is possible. So this is not really a great place. And then the Zarmast actually up a little bit, all of a sudden back above 300 million, 325 for the sellers, 301 for the buyers. I think that the nerf might have made logistics actually a little bit more needed for small gang and things like that as well. People do tend to be risk averse, and old habits die hard. As a result, I think that people want to keep everything as alive as possible on the field, and the nerf to EHP will have brought more interest to logistics cruisers, which means that, well, they're not crashing down that much. On top of that, across the board, I would say the Tech 2 ships tend to have much higher resistances than their Tech 1 variants, and as a result, that has increased their value because, well, they have better resistances, and you can only do so much with fittings at this point. So pretty interesting stuff. I hope that volatility does come back, but this is, in my opinion, the situation in the Tech 2 ship market. It's going to be a bit harder to find those opportunities in popular ships right now, because people will be very interested in them. We'll see a bit more demand, and it looks like suppliers are not overreacting anymore to price opportunities. Tech 3 ship market next, coming in at 44.25. And did I say Tech 2? It's Tech 3, right? 44.25 Tech 3 ship markets. Let's take a look at this. The Confessor is coming down from a high point of 80 million ISK. That was, of course, kind of crazy. Here across the board in the tactical destroyer market, in my opinion, we had like basically a little bit of a speculative potentially, but also an actual meta shift away from Tech 1 stuff and into the tactical destroyers. Very versatile with their modes, able to go for damage, go for tank, go for speed. All of them are able to do that, and as a result, on the PvP side of things, I think that they went up in value a lot, in interest as well. So we went up to 80 million ISK. The downward spike is very sharp as well. Let's take a look at what the price we're asking for now. 47 million though. 40 million was a normal price, so we're still paying a premium. But we did just go down to 47 million, and look at that, we do go down very quickly. With 63 here is going to keep things in check a little bit, but look at how quickly we go from 60 down to 47. This is really, a very volatile market right now because of, I think the trigger was the announcement of the EHP nerf with the resistance nerf. Still 42 million for the sellers, buyers as well, so that is still a pretty nice premium on the Confessor. Next up, we've got the Hecate that went up to 80 million as well. Is going down in price, but much more slowly. 72 million for the sellers, 58 million for the buyers. Not that much supply coming in, so really on the Confessor we do have some volumes, but it's not even that crazy. Keep that in mind. We could go back up very quickly here on the Confessor, or maybe a 100 fleet purchase or something like that from an alliance. While the Hecate is still 70 plus million on the sellers, 58 million for the buyers. Massive premium, of course, the Hecate, with also the increased damage from Blaster Void, I think it's called, or the Tech 2 short range ammo there is going to be very popular as well. You've got that speed mode, so you can close the distance actually with the Hecate, potentially a lot better than some of the Tech 1 ships that would be brawler ships, and so this one is staying very popular, I think, for PvP. Let's take a look at the Jackdaw next. That one was not really moving that much, but now it's basically forced up, I think, swept up in the wave of the other PvP ships, right? You can brawl with the Confessor, it's a great PvP platform. The Hecate is doing crazy stuff, of course, because that one with blasters, close the distance on speed, tackle your enemy, and then switch to damage mode and just go crazy bonkers with a 15% increase to your ammo. It swept up the Jackdaw as well. We're above 50 million on the chart, 52 almost for the sellers, 41 million for the buyers. They're hesitating a little bit, not willing to pull that much away from the 40 million, but I think here this is normal, although you would say that maybe the Jackdaw is the biggest casualty, of course, of the EHP resistance nerf, and the missiles don't have that buff. They're the kiter ship that might now be more in trouble with the Hecate. I think it still has its place, even in PvP, but especially in PvE. because it's more a speed tanking ship the way I use it than a resistance dependent ship. And yeah, it's being swept up here in that massive, especially Hecate wave that is still rolling, and the Confessor wave that's recovering but staying decently high. And then finally here we've got this Vapel that also rolled up to 55 million, is coming back down to a more reasonable 44 million, 37.7 million as well for the buyers. Basically the least popular one it seems to be the Vapel, and I wouldn't say, you know, on when it happened here in the I did make one like really pertinent prediction. I think this spike here on this Vapel, I predicted it because it was being swept up by what was happening in the other ships as well. Eventually that supply dried up, but now I don't dare to make any predictions on this on this decline, because it is still the least popular ship amongst tactical destroyers, I think, and as a result it's the cheapest right now, and it may not make that much of a bounce as well. The Confessor wave is crashing right now. Hecate is also starting to crash. We'll see how quickly that goes, and then the Jackdaw wave has just, you know, been swept up as a consequence of that. But I wouldn't say that it has enough momentum to push this Vapel back up either. I think here the market may be finding its range already. But interesting times, very unpredictable times, and those are of course always full of opportunity and risk. Let's move on to the cruisers here. The Legion crashing down. That is crazy as well. Went up to 190 million ISK, and now look at that crash down. Less than 140 on the chart. It's 138 million for the sellers, 122 million for the buyers. So if you want in on some tech tree speculation, try to grab a couple of really cheap Legions right now. Look at this, is the basically the third wave that we notice here on this 1 year chart, and we are back at a 1 year low points in a month time from a high point. That is very, very crazy. Be careful here. I think that this is a very difficult market to trade in because of the super low volumes that tend to be involved here. We are talking, what would it be that has crashed? I mean, I'm gonna say this is probably 30 ships that have brought it down from 141 to 138. Then here we get maybe another 30 ships to go from 150 down to 140, and then here we've got maybe another 20 ships to bring it from 180 down to 160. So this is really on not a lot of ships. This stuff moves super quickly, but right now yeah, buying a Legion makes all the sense in the world. I think for the Loki we're also going back down, but we're stalling at 200 million. This does to me mean that, I mean, this is traders that are doing this stuff. This is not really the market. So 205 for the sellers, 184 for the buyers. That is not yet that low point when we went to less than 150. So here I would dare to be a little bit more patient. This does feel a lot more risky. The Legion almost looks like a no-brainer to me. But yeah, the Loki also crashing down here. Then we get a Proteus that is staying at the 180 mark. The least popular one is now like 50 million more expensive than the Legion. It has been nerfed. I think both of these have been nerfed. I should mention that, but it can't be to the point where all of a sudden it's a worthless, the worst tactical cruiser in my opinion. Let me know in the comments if I'm wrong, but I don't think that that's the case. Proteus staying around 180, 182 for the sellers, 153 for the buyers. I would say if you bought one for like 130-ish, you could definitely still try to be selling that one. And then the Tengu also recovered from a spike of 250 and is able to still command a decent price, 190 for the sellers, 167 for the buyers. Same thing if here in February, for instance, you bought for 150 and below, you can still be trying to sell this one. Yeah, very interesting stuff, of course. Lots and lots of volatility in the tech tree market in general, and here this Legion crash is just yeah, bonkers. I think I'm gonna try to grab one Legion, price range wise. Man, I'd go 125 or something like that. 125 million, and a month ago this stuff was selling for 190. That is crazy to go from a 1 year high point to 1 year low point in such a short amount of time. I can't believe that the nerf for the Legion is that bad. And then we get our final, the extra product, of course, coming in at 52.45. And you guys saw it in the partial search already. What I'm planning to do, of course, it is the Gecko. Because of the hunt, this should see a drastic decline in price, and we did. So we went up to 180 million. Love this 1 year chart, of course, for people that invested in the Gecko and actually sold one or two, I think, over here in like 170, 175 range. But this is why the Gecko is so interesting, so unique in general, because it is something that you can't just grind Gecko blueprints, you can't keep producing them. They are event related, and so they have this very nice protection against inflation built into them until CCP, of course, opens the floodgates again, which happened with the hunt. And then you see this crashing down and price back down to 200 million, yeah, 100 million, Jesus. And you can see the volumes here, people trying to take advantage of, all right, we're making geckos, we can try and sell them for 180, 150, let's bring that to the market right now, try and take that price, but it's too much, and then it crashes back down to 100 million, and then of course that's maybe a little bit too optimistic, and we're back up to 132 million right now, 120 for the buyers. I would say keep a little bit of an eye on how it evolves, because the 20-day moving average is still going down, and if like me, there's people that are seeing all of this activity and saying, I'm actually going to wait a little bit with my BPCs. I'm going to wait for all of the production materials to go back down in price a little bit. All of this hype is not the right time to be making them, to be trying to sell them, compete with all of that. I've got a little bit of patience. I would not be surprised that there's plenty of players that have Gecko BPCs still out there waiting to bring him back to the market, and that we can still be in for a little bit of a pressure, a difficult time for the Gecko prices to recover. And that is where people that have a little bit of patience but want to get that Gecko investment going, keep a close eye on it. Don't buy all of them whenever you think we're at the bottom, but try to slowly take your positions, build up those Gecko positions. I think we're in for a wavy period now in the Gecko as people try to balance making them as cheaply as possible, getting the best price, and sometimes we'll see this overreaction, I think, come back, and we'll get some nice buy opportunities for the Gecko. But this is, of course, the example for CCP having a massive impact on the market, and this is one of those, there's not that many of them, but one of those very unique items in EVE Online that cannot be created by the players themselves outside of CCP deciding that, okay, we're gonna bring back some extra geckos through the game to the game through one of the events. It's very, very cool, and it's a little bit, to me, like the gold of EVE Online. Because if you're in that phase where CCP is not bringing you geckos, you get destruction, you get consumption, they're not being made, and they are a really good hedge against inflation. You can see here that slow uptrend here going up to 180 million. Yeah, incredible opportunity in this, of course, in a very predictable way, in the sense that CCP does tend to not just run an event with geckos every month or anything like that. So there's some risk in it, but it feels like it's very, very manageable in my personal opinion. Very cool to see the effect of the hunt, of that one event that doesn't even last that long on this market. It's really impressive. I think we're in for a turbulent time, so again, be a little bit patient. I think that's the right move right now. And there we go, guys. That's it for this EVE Talk. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you guys next time.